The Demon's Bride. 12 friends left the city on a cold Saturday morning, heading for a remote house in the countryside that one of them had rented for the weekend. The place stood alone at the end of a long dirt track, surrounded by dense woods and an overgrown garden that had not been touched in years. The sky was gray and low, and a thin mist clung to the ground even in the middle of the day. The group was lively at first. There was Daniel, the organizer, always trying to keep everyone happy. Sophie, quiet and observant, who preferred to watch rather than speak. Ryan and his girlfriend Mia, constantly joking. Jake, the loud one, already planning drinking games. Emma, practical and slightly nervous. Liam, who had brought a portable speaker. Noah, the one with the camera. Ava, who loved old houses. Chloe, always checking her phone. And finally Isabella and her closest friend Grace. Isabella had been strangely quiet during the journey, staring out of the window as if her mind was elsewhere. When they arrived, the house felt colder than the air outside. The furniture was old but clean. The electricity worked, though the lights flickered now and then. In the basement, they found something unexpected. A large, rusted machine covered in tarpaulin. It looked like an old generator, but the metal was carved with strange symbols and the wires were thick and black, almost like veins. No one knew what it was for. Daniel shrugged and said they should leave it alone. That night the wind rose. The trees outside scraped against the windows. Isabella disappeared for a while. When she returned, her eyes looked different, darker, deeper. She smiled in a way that made Grace uneasy. Later, while the others were drinking in the living room, Isabella went back down to the basement alone. She stood in front of the machine, placed a small silver ring on her finger, and whispered words no one else could hear. Something answered her from inside the metal. By morning, the atmosphere in the house had changed. Isabella no longer laughed with the others. She moved slowly, as if listening to something only she could hear. When Grace asked if she was all right, Isabella simply smiled and said, "I'm married now." Grace thought it was a strange joke. That afternoon, the first incident happened. Liam went to the kitchen to get more drinks and never came back. They found him 20 minutes later in the hallway, standing perfectly still, eyes black and empty, mouth stretched into a smile that was not his own. When Ryan touched his shoulder, Liam turned and sank his teeth into Ryan's arm. Blood sprayed across the wall. The others pulled him off, but Liam kept laughing in a voice that belonged to someone else. They locked him in an upstairs bedroom. Isabella watched from the stairs, calm and silent. As the day went on, more of them began to change. Mia started humming a soft, childish tune that none of them recognized. Jake's hands began to shake and black lines appeared under his skin. Noah's camera kept recording even when he wasn't holding it, the lens turning by itself toward Isabella. Sophie tried to call for help, but every phone showed no signal. The cars outside would not start. The woods around the house seemed thicker than before. The path they had driven in on completely gone. In the basement, the old machine had begun to hum. A low, steady vibration that traveled through the floorboards and into their bones. Isabella spent more and more time down there, standing in front of it with her eyes closed. the silver ring on her finger glowing faintly in the dark. Night fell early. The lights in the house began to fail one by one. Only a few candles remained. Emma was the next to turn. She had been sitting alone in the corner when her body suddenly arched backwards. Her neck cracked as her head twisted too far. When she looked up again, her eyes were pure black. She crawled across the floor toward Chloe on all fours, moving in a way no human spine should allow. Chloe screamed and ran. Emma followed, still smiling. Daniel tried to fight back with a kitchen knife, but the thing that had been Emma simply took the blade into its shoulder and kept coming. Blood ran down its chest, yet it did not slow. Jake and Noah managed to push it into the bathroom and lock the door, but the scratching that followed was slow and patient, as if it had all the time in the world. Isabella walked through the chaos without fear. Wherever she went, the others who had already changed grew calmer, almost respectful. She was their center now, their bride. Grace finally understood. Isabella had not been joking. Something had been waiting in that machine for a long time, and Isabella had given herself to it. The marriage was real in a way that none of them could reverse. In the basement, the machine glowed with a dull red light. The symbols on its surface moved like living things. Thick black liquid dripped from its base onto the concrete floor and sizzled where it landed. No, this was a different group. One of the remaining friends. Ava suggested they destroy the machine, but every time someone tried to go near it, the changed ones blocked the way, their bodies twisting into shapes that no longer looked human. By the third night, only 5 of them were still themselves. Grace, Daniel, Sophie, Ryan, and Noah. The rest of the house belonged to the others, and the ones with black eyes and broken limbs who no longer needed sleep or food. They simply waited, watching, humming that same soft tune. Isabella stood at the top of the basement stairs, the silver ring shining on her hand. "You cannot leave," she said softly. "He is already inside all of you. Some of you just haven't accepted it yet." Daniel made a final attempt to reach the machine with a can of petrol he had found in the garden shed. He poured it over the metal and struck a match. The flames rose for a few seconds, then died as if something had swallowed the fire. The machine hummed louder in response, almost pleased. Sophie broke down, crying that they were all going to die here. Ryan held her, but his own hands had begun to tremble. Black lines were already creeping up his wrists. Grace looked at the machine and then at her own hands. She remembered something her grandmother had once told her about old spirits and the power of willing sacrifice. Fire given freely was different from ordinary flame. She went to the kitchen and found a bottle of strong alcohol. Without telling the others, she soaked a cloth and wrapped it tightly around her right hand and forearm. The final hour came in silence. Grace walked down the basement steps alone. Isabella was waiting beside the machine, smiling. "You cannot hurt him," she said. "He is my husband now." Grace did not answer. She lit the cloth on her arm. The fire climbed fast, bright and fierce, burning her skin. She did not scream. She simply ran forward and pressed her burning hand against the heart of the machine. The metal shrieked. The symbols flared white. For the first time, the machine sounded afraid. The changed ones upstairs began to howl. Isabella's smile vanished. She lunged at Grace, but it was too late. The fire from Grace's arm had taken hold deep inside the machine. Then the caretaker of the house and an older man who had been watching from the edge of the woods the entire time stepped into the basement. He carried a large industrial fan. Without a word, he switched it on and pointed the strong wind directly at the flames. The fire exploded outward, feeding on the air, wrapping the entire machine in a roaring column of heat and light. The metal began to melt. The black liquid boiled and evaporated. Isabella fell to her knees, clutching her head, the silver ring cracking on her finger. Outside, the woods seemed to draw back. The path reappeared. When the sun rose the next morning, the machine was nothing but twisted, blackened metal. Isabella lay still on the floor, her eyes normal again but empty of life. The others who had been changed were gone. Only their clothes remained, scattered through the house. Grace sat on the front steps, her right arm burned almost to the bone, staring at the rising light. The remaining friends stood behind her in silence. No one spoke about what they had seen. No one ever returned to that house. And on quiet nights, if the wind was right, some still claimed they could hear a soft, childish tune drifting from the empty woods.